What would you do if the woman who baked your husband's birthday cakes tried to poison you at dinner? I remember the exact moment I knew something was off. It was a Saturday evening in Richmond, Virginia. We were seated around the long mahogany dining table that Dolores, my mother-in-law, loved to brag about. Candlelight flickered gently, casting shadows on the floral wallpaper and reflecting off the polished silverware. Eric, my husband, was already halfway through his plate of baked ziti, his favorite. It looked perfectly normal, bubbling cheese, crisped edges, red sauce with just the right hint of basil. Mine looked gray, pale, lifeless. Dolores slid the plate in front of me with a smile so sweet it curdled in my gut. "I made this just for you, dear," she said. The scent hit me immediately, metallic, bitter, not even close to the aroma of baked pasta. My stomach turned. I looked up to find Dolores watching me too closely, waiting. That's when the chill crept into my spine. "My name is Lauren McCauley. I'm 39 years old, a public school teacher from North Carolina. And for 6 years, I've been married to Eric Harrison, the man I love, the man whose mother never once truly accepted me." Dolores made sure of that. From the very first day she met me, I was the girl from nowhere, not a debutante, not from money, not worthy of the Harrison name. What I wanted was simple to be accepted into the family. What I got instead was 6 years of polite sabotage comments about my cooking, snide remarks about my background, condescending advice wrapped in fake kindness. And now, this plate smells different, I said, casually lifting the fork. "Oh, it's a family recipe," Dolores replied, eyes twinkling in a way that made my skin crawl. "Passed down from generations of strong women. I thought you'd appreciate something unique." I didn't take a bite. Instead, I reached into my purse beneath the table and quietly opened my voice recorder app. Something about the way she was looking at me, too eager to, still set off alarms in my head. "You made this version just for me?" I asked lightly. "Of course, Lauren," she said, her smile stretching too wide. "After all these years, I figured it was time to share something special, just between us girls." Her voice didn't sound maternal. It sounded gleeful, anticipatory. The fork trembled slightly in my hand. As I poked at the pasta, I noticed green flecks that definitely weren't parsley or oregano. They looked strange, almost synthetic. I leaned in, trying to identify the scent, but the closer I got, the more nauseating it became. Sharp metallic like wet pennies in ammonia. Across from me, Eric was oblivious, scrolling through his phone with one hand and twirling pasta with the other. The contrast between our meals couldn't have been more obvious. "Eric's stomach is so delicate," Dolores said too quickly. "I wouldn't want to upset it. But you always seem so adventurous." I forced a smile and set the fork down. "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "Tell me more about the herbs. I've never seen anything quite like them." Her expression darkened just a touch, but her voice stayed syrupy. "Oh, just something I foraged," she said, from the woods behind the house. "Rare herbs, very potent. You won't forget them." I looked at her hands. They were trembling not from age, but from anticipation. She wanted me to eat. She was waiting for it. And that's when I knew this wasn't some quirky mistake. This wasn't an overly eager home cook showing off. This was premeditated. This was dangerous. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as I fought to keep my face neutral. If I panicked, she'd know. If I refused, she might lash out. So I leaned into the act. "Did you say foraged?" "That's impressive," I said, twirling another bite and pretending to examine it. "I've always wanted to learn more about local herbs." Her eyes glittered. "Oh, I did lots of research," she said proudly. "Tested a few on those stray cats that hang around outside. Wanted to make sure they weren't too strong." My breath caught. Stray cats. Tested them. The way she said it, so casual, so unconcerned, made my blood run cold. Eric still hadn't looked up. Not once. I stood up carefully. "Excuse me for a second," I said. "Need to use the restroom." Dolores nodded her smile, not faltering for a second. I could feel her eyes on my back as I walked down the hallway. Once the bathroom door was locked, I didn't hesitate. I called 911. "My mother-in-law may be trying to poison me," I whispered. "She served me food that smells wrong and admitted to using substances from the woods behind her house stuff she said she tested on animals." The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly. I gave them the address and added, "I haven't eaten it." I also have her recorded making some pretty chilling comments. "Stay on the line," they said. "Officers are on the way." I sent a quick text to my friend Danielle, an off-duty officer I trusted with my life. "Danielle, emergency, at Eric's mom's house. She's trying to poison me. Police on the way. Please come if you can." I flushed the toilet for effect, took a steadying breath, and returned to the dining room. Dolores's expression didn't change. "Feeling better?" "Dear, much," I replied, sitting back down and lifting my fork again. "Before I dig in, I'm just so curious. These herbs, you said they're rare." Her eyes gleamed. "Oh yes, most people can't handle them, but I thought you might be different." I gave her my brightest smile. "Well, I do love a challenge." Outside, I heard the sound of car doors slamming. Dolores frowned. "Who could that be?" she murmured, getting up to check the window. The doorbell rang. Then came the knock. "Richmond Police Department. Ma'am, we need to speak with you." Dolores turned slowly to face me. "You called the police," she whispered. I stood up, calm and clear. I certainly did. I wish I could say that moment calling the police was the first time I felt truly unsafe around Dolores. But it wasn't. It was simply the first time I had proof. The truth is, the signs had been there for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. The first time I met Dolores was 6.5 years ago. Eric and I had been dating for 5 months, and he invited me to his parents' home for Sunday brunch. I was nervous, excited, but hopeful. I brought a homemade blueberry coffee cake, my mother's recipe. Dolores took one look at the cake, then at me, and said, "How quaint. You bake the way she said it, like I'd offered her a dead fish." She didn't try it, not a bite. But she made a big show of bringing out her own little something, which just happened to be a fresh berry tart from a local upscale bakery. She wanted to make sure we had something edible, Eric told me later, laughing as if it were a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was a pattern. Every visit after that came with subtle barbs, backhanded compliments. "Oh, Lauren, that blouse is fun." Or, Eric's used to a different kind of lifestyle. "It'll be quite an adjustment for him." At first I brushed it off. Eric loved me after all. Dolores would come around. She didn't. If anything, she escalated. About 2 years into our marriage, I started getting sick after meals at her house. Nausea, migraines, sometimes even fever. Always just me. Never Eric. Never anyone else. One night after dinner, I ended up in urgent care. The doctor said it was food poisoning. Could have been undercooked meat, he suggested, but Dolores had served a vegetarian quiche. When I told her, she gasped and clutched her pearls. "Oh dear, was the cream off? Or maybe the eggs weren't fresh. I'm so sorry, Lauren." I'm always careful, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. It sounded reasonable. Accidents happen. But then it happened again and again. The most blatant was last Christmas. She gave me a tray of holiday cookies she claimed were sugar-free. "I know you're watching your weight," she said, like it was a kindness. The first bite tasted wrong, bitter, like soap. My tongue tingled. Eric tried one and spat it out immediately. "Mom, did you mix up the sugar substitute?" he asked. Dolores smiled sweetly. "Oh no, perhaps I used the wrong extract. Vanilla and almond bottles look so similar, don't they? But the thing is, almond extract doesn't taste like bleach. I spent the next 24 hours vomiting." Dolores sent me a lavender-scented card with a note that read, "Get well soon, dear." "Next year, I'll let someone else do the baking." I showed the card to my therapist a week later. "She's gaslighting you," she said plainly. "This isn't forgetfulness. It's malicious." But I still wasn't ready to believe that. Eric had been raised by this woman. She used to read him bedtime stories and bandage scraped knees. I didn't want to be the wife who drove a wedge between a son and his mother. So I stayed silent. I made excuses. I told myself I was overreacting, but deep down I was afraid. Afraid that one day the accidents wouldn't just make me sick. They'd kill me. I started noticing strange things in her house. Her garden books opened to chapters on poisonous plants, a bookmarked page on common foraging mistakes, a sticky note on her fridge that said check dosage for size. At the time, I chalked it up to her obsession with herbal remedies. She was always trying to play apothecary, making her own oils, growing special mint and lemon balm in the backyard. She had an answer for everything. "Oh, that note, just something from my yoga instructor," she said once, casually waving it away. "He's a holistic health coach, very intense. Looking back now, I feel stupid. I should have trusted my gut." That's the part that haunts me most, not just what Dolores did, but how long I ignored the alarm bells ringing in my own head. 2 months before the dinner from hell, Dolores invited us over for her herb garden showcase. She made a massive deal of the fact that she was cultivating rare plants with medicinal potential. I remember standing on her porch, looking at the potted plants lined up like little soldiers, and feeling a chill I couldn't explain. Some had no labels, others had names written in Latin. When I asked about one with deep purple leaves, she smiled and said, "Oh, that one's my secret ingredient. Only for special occasions." Later that night, I Googled it based on the leaf shape. The results, digitalis purpurea, foxglove, used to treat heart failure in small doses, can cause cardiac arrest in larger ones, I told Eric. He laughed. "Babe, you're getting worked up again. Mom's not a witch. She just likes her garden." Now sitting at her dining table with that poisoned pasta in front of me, I realized this wasn't new. This was the finale. The pasta was her endgame. The bitter cookies, the tainted drinks, the garden tours. They were just rehearsals, a slow burn. She had been testing my limits, training me to doubt my instincts, softening me up for the final performance. And if I hadn't recorded that conversation, if I had taken one bite, I might not have lived to tell this story. I sat there, my pulse pounding in my ears, the fork still poised like a weapon in my hand. Dolores's pasta dish sat inches from my face, its gray sheen catching the chandelier, light the scent growing more noxious by the second. She was watching me again. That gleam in her eye had gone beyond eager. It was hungry. "Go on, try a bite," she said, voice low and syrupy. "Tell me what you think of my special recipe." I forced a smile. "Just one more question," I said lightly. "These green flecks, they look so unusual. You really found them out in the woods." Dolores's mouth curled. "Oh yes, right near that old trail Eric used to ride his bike on as a boy. I did my research. Very selective picking." I leaned forward. Selective, how she lowered her voice as if sharing a family secret. I wanted to make sure they were just strong enough, not enough to hurt, at least not right away, just enough for effect. Effect. The word echoed in my skull. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. "What kind of effect?" I asked, my tone still bright, like calming, soothing. She tilted her head and smiled wider. "Oh, I think you'll find it unforgettable." My fingers clenched around the fork's handle. I reminded myself, don't react, don't show fear, keep her talking. The recorder in my purse was still running. I needed more, needed her to spell it out. "I wish I had your foraging skills," I said. "So many plants out there look dangerous, though," she laughed softly. "Only if you don't know what you're doing." "I've had, let's call them trial runs." "Trial runs," I echoed. Her eyes flicked toward the garden window. "Stray cats. A shame, really, but someone has to test the waters." There it was, the confession. I blinked once. "And what happened to them?" "Oh, they wandered off," she said, waving a hand. "Laid down somewhere, I imagine." My mouth was dry, my stomach roiled not from the food, but from the horror. She had tested her poison on living creatures. Not accidentally, deliberately, carefully. This woman, the one who sent hand-embroidered napkins for every holiday and insisted on family prayer, had been experimenting like some backwoods chemist with an herb obsession and a god complex. And Eric had no idea. He was still glued to his phone halfway through his pasta, as if nothing in the world were wrong. I felt like I was living in a parallel universe. How could he not feel the ice in the air, the darkness curling under Dolores's words? Then, the knock. 3 quick raps at the door. Dolores froze mid-sentence. A beat, then another knock, louder, firmer. Richmond Police Department. "Ma'am, we need you to open the door." She slowly turned her head toward me. "You called them?" I stood up. Yes, I did. Her face contorted, the sweetness peeling away in an instant like flesh from a rotten fruit. "You butch," she spat. "You manipulative, pathetic." I raised my voice over hers. "You admitted on tape to foraging toxic herbs and testing them on animals. You called this meal an experience I'd never forget. You've been trying to hurt me for months." Eric finally looked up. Wait, what? He blinked. "What's going on?" I didn't answer. The front door opened. I saw 2 officers step inside. One was Officer Martinez, the other Officer Chen, and behind them, like a miracle, was Danielle off duty, but fully alert, her badge clipped to her jeans and her eyes locked onto mine. "Lauren," she said, walking toward me. "Are you okay? I didn't eat it," I said, voice trembling now that the danger was real, not just hypothetical. "The food's still there. My phone recorded everything," she confessed. Danielle nodded. Step away from the table. Dolores's face was twisted into something feral. "You believe her?" "Over me," she shrieked. "I have lived in this town for 30 years. I run the charity gala. I bake for the women's shelter." Danielle was calm. "You also just admitted on record to foraging unknown substances and testing them on animals." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to move away from the food. We need to secure the scene." "I want a lawyer," Dolores snapped. "This is outrageous." "Of course," he said. "And your lawyer can meet you at the station. But we need to investigate these claims." Danielle turned to Eric, who looked pale and confused. "She said your mother served her food with unknown substances, that she's been sick before, that the green flecks in this dish aren't herbs. We're going to have the meal tested." Eric looked at our 2 plates, mine untouched and grayish green, his half-finished and perfectly normal. The realization began to dawn. Mom," he said softly. "What is this?" Dolores turned to him with pleading eyes. "Eric, she's lying. She wants to turn you against me." Eric pointed to the plate. "Why does her pasta look different than mine?" Dolores faltered. Because yours is mild. You always said spicy food upset your stomach." "That's not spicy," he said. "That's gray." Danielle stepped forward with gloves and an evidence kit. She carefully photographed both plates, then scraped samples into sealed containers. "I need to call in hazmat," she said quietly to Officer Chen. "We don't know what's in this." I watched Dolores's composure crack. The confident smile was gone. The sweetness had curdled. She looked like a cornered animal, eyes darting, voice cracking. "You people are ruining my life," she screeched. "No," I said, voice calm but steel under velvet. "You did that all by yourself." Dolores stood motionless in the dining room, her face pale and twitching as Danielle zipped up the last evidence bag. Her manicured fingers curled into fists by her sides, knuckles white with fury. Eric hadn't moved. He just stared first at the 2 plates of pasta, then at his mother, then at me. "Mom," he said again. Quieter this time. "What did you do?" Dolores didn't answer. She kept flicking her gaze toward the officers, her chest rising and falling rapidly like a trapped animal, realizing the cage had already closed. Officer Martinez finished photographing the table, then turned to her gently. "Ma'am, we'll be taking these samples to our lab for testing. In the meantime, we need you to remain here while we finish securing the scene." Dolores tried to laugh, but it came out dry and fractured. "This is absurd. You'll see. It's all just a misunderstanding. Lauren has always been dramatic. I have a recording," I said simply. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened the voice memo app, and tapped play. Her voice filled the room. Let's just say they'll give you an experience you'll never forget. I found them in the woods. Very selective picking. I tested them on some of the stray cats. Someone has to test the waters. The room was dead silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Dolores's voice, cold, confident, and damning. Eric looked like he'd been punched. His lips parted, his brow furrowed as the full realization set in. "You tested poison on animals," he whispered. "I was protecting you." Dolores said suddenly, her tone sharp. "You don't understand. She was ruining your life." He flinched. "You tried to kill my wife." The words hit the room like a grenade. "I did what I had to do," she snapped. "You were slipping away from me. I gave you everything, Eric. I raised you alone after your father died. I made you, and you threw me aside for her." I turned to Danielle. "There's more. She has books, notes. There was a spiral notebook in the pantry labeled Botanicals last time I was here." Danielle nodded and called Officer Chen. "Search the pantry. Top shelf. She's methodical. If she planned this, she documented it." As Chen disappeared down the hall, Dolores exploded. "You have no right to search my house. You need a warrant. You gave verbal consent when we entered, ma'am." Officer Martinez reminded her, "We're acting on a credible threat to life and there's potential evidence of ongoing harm to animals and humans. Your cooperation is appreciated." Dolores let out a choked sound and slumped into the nearest chair. Her perfectly curated image had finally unraveled. Within minutes, Officer Chen returned holding a spiral-bound composition notebook with a floral cover. Found it. He passed it to Danielle, who carefully slipped on gloves and opened to the first page. Her brow furrowed. Then her eyes widened. "She wasn't just playing herbalist," Danielle murmured. "This is a research log." She held it up so Eric and I could see. Meticulously dated entries filled each page in Dolores's elegant handwriting. Tested foxglove blend on milk. Taste masked with peppermint oil too strong. Lauren only ate half of cookie batch. Note reduced bitterness with brown sugar. Pokeweed worked better. No vomiting, just dizziness. Increased dosage by 15% next time. Eric staggered backward. She was testing, tracking symptoms on Lauren. She was experimenting, Danielle said grimly, and she was escalating. Then Officer Chen's radio crackled. "Dispatch be advised, hazmat team just uncovered 3 shallow graves in the back garden, believed to be animal remains, requesting veterinarian support and confirmation, suspected poisoning." I covered my mouth. The cats. They hadn't wandered off. They had died. My stomach churned violently. I wanted to run scream-cry, but I stood frozen, rooted in disbelief. Eric swore under his breath and turned to his mother. "Those cats. You said they were just strays. You said they stopped coming around because of the weather." Dolores's voice was hollow now. "They were old, sick. I was doing them a favor." "No," he said, his voice shaking. "You were practicing." Danielle gently closed the notebook. "Ma'am, based on what we've seen, you are now being placed under arrest for attempted poisoning, animal cruelty, and reckless endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." "I am a pillar of this community," Dolores shrieked. "You people have no idea who you're dealing with." "You're dealing with the truth," I said, stepping forward, "and for once it's louder than your lies." Danielle guided Dolores up, and Officer Chen began reading her rights in full. She didn't resist, but she didn't go quietly either. "You destroyed this family," she spat at me. "You wormed your way into our lives like rot." "No," Eric said softly. "You did that the moment you decided my wife didn't deserve to live." After she was escorted out, Eric collapsed onto the couch like a man aged 20 years in an hour. He stared at nothing. Danielle came over and crouched in front of me. "We'll have the pasta tested. We'll catalog the notebook, log the animal remains, and submit the recording. With all this, the DA will have everything they need." "Thank you," I whispered. "You saved me." "No," she said. "You saved yourself. You trusted your gut. You stayed calm. That's what saved your life tonight." I looked over at Eric. He was crying silently. "I should have seen it," he whispered. "God, Lauren, I'm so sorry. I just, I didn't think she'd ever, I know I said. I didn't either. But deep down, I had always suspected. I just hadn't wanted to believe someone could hate me so much for simply existing. The story made headlines across the state before Dolores even saw the inside of a courtroom. Socialite mother-in-law accused of poison plot, baked ziti and betrayal in Richmond, woman records own poisoning attempt at dinner table. But none of the headlines captured what it felt like to sit in that courtroom weeks later and face the woman who had tried to kill me. Dolores Harrison had always been meticulous. Her hair was always perfectly styled. Her jewelry matched her shoes. Her voice was soft and measured until it wasn't. But on the day of her trial, all that poise cracked. She sat at the defendant's table in a pale blue cardigan, her hair frizzed at the temples, her eyes darting as the courtroom filled with spectators and press. Eric sat beside me. His suit hung looser than usual, like he'd shrunk in the months since her arrest. His face was gaunt. Exhaustion clung to him like fog. "I still don't understand how I didn't see it," he whispered. "I think part of you did," I said gently. "You just didn't want to." He didn't argue. The prosecutor began with the voice recording, Dolores's own words played back for the jury. I tested them on some of the stray cats. Most people can't handle them, but I thought you might be different. Something just between us girls. Then came the photos, the side-by-side comparison of the two pasta dishes. Mine gray and flecked with unnatural green, his warm and red and comforting. And then came the journal. Danielle took the stand and held it up for the jury. Each page was displayed on a screen, handwritten logs of toxicity symptoms, dosage, timing. Lauren reacted to 1 TSP of pokeweed extract with dizziness and nausea. Next time, blend foxglove with oil to reduce bitterness. Add crushed mushroom cap in pasta sauce for slower onset. I watched the jury's faces change with each entry. Shock, disgust, horror. Then came the veterinarian who confirmed that the cats buried in the garden had all died from the same combination of substances found in my food, pokeweed foxglove, and something even more lethal, Amanita virosa, destroying angel, a mushroom so toxic that even a small amount could lead to liver failure and death. Dolores had blended it into a sauce she intended me to eat for dinner. She hadn't just tried to hurt me. She had planned to end me quietly in her own home with the same fork and knife she used for holidays. The prosecution rested its case with a powerful statement. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was slow, calculated, cruel. This was a woman who spent over a year crafting the perfect poison and smiling while she served it. Dolores's defense attorney argued situational insanity, blaming an alleged medication interaction menopause and a supposed fear of losing her only son. She was overwhelmed, he said. Empty nest syndrome, untreated grief. She lost her husband, then feared losing her son. But the notebook destroyed any hope of sympathy. There was no spiral into madness. There was structure, timing, revisions, scientific precision. And then it was my turn. I took the stand and told my story, every meal, every insult, every time I walked away from her house with a stomachache and a pit of dread. I told them about the cookies, the mild mix-ups, the herbal showcases. I told them about the night I recorded her, the night I realized I was never going to be good enough for her, unless I died. Eric testified too. He didn't try to hide his shame. I didn't believe my wife, he told the court. I made excuses for my mother. I told myself Lauren was exaggerating, that she was just being sensitive. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was really enabling a nightmare. He described Dolores's perfectionism, her obsession with appearances, her simmering contempt for outsiders. She wrote about my wife like a lab rat, he said, voice cracking. She documented her suffering. She was proud of it. When he stepped down, he didn't return to the gallery. He walked out of the courtroom and didn't come back. The verdict took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted first-degree murder. 3 counts of felony animal cruelty. Premeditated use of toxic substances. Tampering with food intended for human consumption. Dolores didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sat there unmoving as if refusing to acknowledge the court's authority. But as the judge read out her sentence, 25 years with no chance of parole, she finally turned toward me. "You destroyed my family," she whispered loud enough for only me to hear. I met her gaze and said evenly, "No, you destroyed it the moment you decided I was better off dead." The bailiff took her away. She didn't look back. After the trial, reporters swarmed. People reached out from all over the country. Strangers wrote letters saying I had a toxic mother-in-law too, but I never thought it could go that far. But behind closed doors, it wasn't over, because while Dolores was in prison, my marriage was already crumbling. Already. The day the trial ended, I thought I'd finally feel peace. Justice had been served. Dolores was behind bars. The world knew the truth. But when I returned home that night, the silence in our house felt heavier than ever. Eric didn't come back with me. After giving his testimony, he disappeared, not in a dramatic way, just quiet. He left the courthouse with nothing but a single sentence: "I need time." I understood, but I also knew it wasn't time he needed. It was clarity, and maybe accountability. We tried for a few weeks. Therapy sessions, apologies, long conversations that always circled back to the same aching truth. For 6 years, he hadn't believed me. Not when I got sick, not when I voiced my suspicions, not when I begged him to see the signs. Instead, he'd told me I was overreacting, that I misunderstood his mother, that I was too sensitive, and every time he'd dismissed me, I had swallowed it down. I told myself he meant well, that it wasn't that bad. That I could manage. But that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers so softly that you don't even know you're bleeding until you're already on the floor. 6 months after the trial, we signed divorce papers. It wasn't dramatic. No fights, just quiet agreement. "I will never stop being sorry," Eric said, voice shaking, "and I'll never stop being grateful that you survived her." I nodded. "I survived both of you." He blinked, and for the first time, he didn't try to explain. He just nodded back. We parted ways in silence. I moved back to North Carolina, to a little town outside Charlotte, where no one knew my name or my story. I rented a modest house with a fenced yard and started over. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. The settlement from the divorce was enough for me to take time off from teaching. I'd been in survival mode for so long, I didn't remember what peace felt like. But healing wasn't a straight line. I couldn't eat anything I didn't make myself. I flinched when I saw anything green in food, spinach, herbs, even innocent parsley. I stopped eating at restaurants. I scrubbed my kitchen twice a day, and I had nightmares. Not of Dolores screaming or being arrested, but of her smiling, serving me tea, handing me a cookie, that saccharine voice whispering, "Just for you." It took time and help. I started therapy again, joined a women's support group for survivors of emotional abuse and manipulation. We called it the Gaslight Club. The first rule: if you had to ask yourself if it was real, it probably was. I volunteered at an animal shelter too. Caring for creatures that had been abandoned or hurt, it grounded me. It reminded me that recovery was possible. There was a little orange tabby that arrived half-starved and shaking. I named her Clementine. She'd been dumped by someone who didn't want her anymore. For weeks, she hid under furniture, but eventually she climbed into my lap and purred. That was the day I knew I was going to be okay. I also started a garden, not for beauty or show, but for control. Raised beds lined the side of my house filled with herbs I chose myself. Basil, thyme, rosemary, nothing wild, nothing foraged, everything labeled, everything safe. And slowly, I reclaimed my instincts. That little voice inside me, the one I'd been taught to doubt, to silence, to second guess, I started listening to it again. The same voice that whispered something was wrong with the cookies, the pasta, the way Dolores looked at me, the voice that saved my life. Sometimes I still get letters, reporters wanting interviews, women sharing their own stories, people asking how I knew. And I tell them the same thing every time: your gut is not your enemy. If it feels wrong, it probably is. Trust it. Dolores tried to poison me, slowly, methodically, with a smile on her face, but what she really tried to kill was my sense of worth, my sanity, my voice. And she failed, because the truth found its way out. Because I documented, I recorded, I remembered. Because I stopped minimizing what I felt. Because I chose to survive and then to live. Looking back now, I know this: I will never be the same woman I was before Dolores tried to destroy me. I'm fiercer, sharper, less trusting, but more self-assured. I know how to protect myself. I know how to fight quietly. And I know that sometimes surviving someone's hate teaches you more about love than anything else. Love, I learned, isn't soft words or family titles. Love is action, belief, protection. And if someone refuses to believe you when you're crying for help, that's not love. That's neglect dressed in comfort. So to anyone out there still questioning whether what they feel is real, whether they're being too sensitive, whether the way someone treats them is just how they are, listen to yourself. You are not imagining it. You are not too much. You are not paranoid. You are being warned. And if you need to walk away, call for help, or leave a dinner table behind, do it. Your life is worth more than someone else's comfort. Mine was, and I'll never forget it again. Have you ever been gaslit or dismissed by someone you trusted? Did your instincts save you before it was too late? Share your story below. If this story struck a nerve, like, subscribe and share. You never know who might need to hear that their voice is worth trusting.